Now that we've experimented with our Jupyter Notebook, now it's time to code our Streamlit app, and I'm using Visual Studio Code. If you open up Visual Studio Code, you should be able to open the folder. So I'm going to go to my folder, which is in my documents, and I've got a Streamlit folder, my music mental health. So this is the folder I want to open. So I'm going to click open on this. And if we look in the Explorer, so it's got my Jupyter Notebook here, my data, which has my CSV file. And then remember I started that virtual environment. So that's why that my env is here. I'm going to open up a Python file that's going to be our Streamlit app. So I'm going to do this plus here. App.py is what I'm going to call it. And so now I've got my Python file. So let's first start with, and a lot of this I'm just going to maybe just to cut down on the typing. First is my import statements. Import, I've got pandas, I've got Streamlit, NumPy, and then I decided I'm going to stick with Plotly. We can use the Matplotlib, the Seaborn, all the different graphs. I decided I'm going to stick with Plotly for this particular app. So those are the libraries that I'm going to import. And then let's just start opening our Streamlit app in our browser. If you remember, we're going to go to make a new terminal. And then within this, we have to do Streamlit. Let's first save this. So I'm going to do appless. Streamlit run app.py. As a reminder, you should, if you haven't already installed Streamlit, you need to do a pip install Streamlit down here in the terminal. I'm going to run the app, and it's going to pop up in a browser window. I'll bring it over here so we can see it. Let me resize here so we can see both of them. Okay, so nothing's going to show up because we've merely imported our libraries. The first thing we want to do is, well, let's just put in a title. So I'm going to say st.title, and I'm going to title it Music and Mental Health Dashboard. Okay, so we get our title. And then the first thing we need to do is to read in the data. To do this, I'm going to make a little function, and I'm going to put this up here, and I'm going to do several functions. So here's the function. The name of it is get data, and inside of it, in this case, I'm going to call the data frame a df. In my Jupyter Notebook, it was called data. Just in here, I'm doing it this way. This is stripping out anyone over 50. So remember, I looked at that in the Jupyter Notebook. So I did the cutoff at age 50, and this will return the data. So what I'm going to do down here is say df equals get data, and that will get in the data. Now, the one thing is that each time you run it, you don't want it to reload the data and all that. So above this particular function, if we put in at st cache data, what will happen is each time you run it, if it's run it once and nothing's changed in the data, it will know not to cache it and not to reload it every single time. Let's do that. Let's save that. Okay, and nothing should change over there other than that we've loaded the data. So what I've decided to do with this is I'm going to have a sidebar, and I'm going to have 3 different sections for my dashboard. I'm going to have one about music, one about mental health, and then I'm going to have a third page which is interactive, where they can select and filter the data. So these are just, again, examples. To do this, I'm going to make a sidebar. And again, I'm just going to copy it in to save on typing. Let's see what this does. So with the ST sidebar, that creates a sidebar. I'm making a subheader that says menu. And then selected is going to make a select box with these as my options. So I'm going to have a home page, music information, mental health information, interactive information. So now if I save that, now I get my menu, and it's a drop-down box, and I can choose from these 4 things. from these four things, I'm going to essentially make 4 different pages or sections that will get displayed. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to say if selected is equal to home. So selected will be set to one of these 4 choices that they make. So if it's home, I'm just going to say display the data frame. So my main home page is just going to display the data. And that's just a way to show that you can display a data file within your dashboard. Then I've split up the other ones into, and I'm going to make these as separate functions. Let's make those different functions now so that we don't get an error. Up here is where I'm making all my functions. So I'm going to go up here above get data. So I made one called def music info. And let's just do a subheader. Let's call this music information, and let me copy these. And this will be, let's call this mental health information. And this one I'm going to call interactive information. So let's just test that. So now in this case, and with the sidebar, you can always close it. That's my main page, which is showing basically the entire data set. And then music information, so it's going to that, mental health, and interactive. Oh. And I'm obviously interactive info. Oh, I called it int page, so let's say interactive. Okay, so let's try again. Yep, so that goes to interactive information. So we know that part's working. So now let's start to create some of the plots. On my music info, I'm going to do some pie charts. I'm going to do a pie chart for the different streaming services, and I can look back at my mental health. A lot of it was just looking at what I did here. Yeah, here. And pretty much grabbing the code that I used here and putting it into Streamlit. Jupyter Notebook is what you're going to use as a basis for the code for your Streamlit app. I'm going to just copy the code in here. And it's probably a good idea to, because I'm going to have a lot of these functions, is to to just describe what's going on in each function. I really just took the value counts just as I did in my Jupyter Notebook. I added this bit about updating the layout, so just setting the width and height, the size of the title. So this is the kind of the addition, is updating the layout, but really just using the Plotly Express pie with the value counts. That will be that one. And then the other one I was going to do is the breakdown of whether people think music had a positive, negative, or no effect. Okay, and again, same thing. We're looking at the value counts of the music effects column and just playing around with the layout. And so these are the functions that create the actual pie charts. And what I'm going to do is here in music info, I'm going to do this in 2 columns. So 2 columns, will just put them side by side. Call 1 and call 2 equals st.columns 2 to give me 2 columns. And then I can say with call 1, call this services pie chart. And then I can say with call 2, call the music effects pie chart. And let's just see if that works. So if I save it, and I can see them now. Generally, you'd have this wider, and it's because I gave them a size, is that they are necessarily that big. Actually, that's not big enough. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play around with the sizes here. I've got auto size equals true. And I'm going to do that for this one. try that. Music. Still not big enough. So let me just. I want these both to have the same size. Let's do 28 for both of these. Okay, and I'm thinking what I potentially missed out on. This additional argument will say just use the container width. And you can see these look very different just because this has so many different possible items in the legend versus this, and these is shorter in length. This is cutting it off. And what I realized that I forgot to do is down here, and it has to be the first thing that you do. So even above the ST title, and I think I can get rid of that now, is this the main page layout. So page title is Music and Mental Health Dashboard, which I think we can get rid of that then. And then if I say wide layout, because it's very contained within this in very large margins. And then I'm also saying initial sidebar state is expanded. So let's save this. Okay, so that's more of what I was hoping for. Perfect. And now they look the same size. They're the full width of their columns. And I can also go back home and then back here. And now they're showing up the way that I was hoping for. So that was an important piece of information for the width. And you may want a less wide layout, but this is the way that I wanted it. All right, so it's the first thing you do, then you get the data, and then I've got all of my other information. And then for the mental health, I think I decided I want to do a box plot. So let's go back up here and add as another. So I'm going to say a box plot of mental health issues. And I will put this in here. And if you remember from the Jupyter notebook, I converted it to long form. So it was giving a row for each of the 4 different mental health issues per respondent. And then I made the box plot. And then I liked my little graph, which was the 4 graphs together. So I'm going to add that one in. Okay, so that's quite a long function. But this was my effects by issue, which is my 4 different plots that I added. And so if I go back down here to my mental health info, I'm going to call those 2. I'll first do my mental health issues box plot, and I'll do my effects by issue. So those will be my 2. And these I'm not going to do in a column, I'm going to have a single column. So if I save this, and now if I go to mental health, so I get my box plot here, and this is because it's plotly, I can hover and get the information. And then this is my mental health issues and the music effects of them. So I've got 2 different plots here around the mental health information. And then my final page is going to be my interactive page. So I'm going to let the user do some selections. So with this one, I'm going to add in an age filter. So this is going to be a select box. So there's going to be a drop down box. Choose an age group to view preferences. And it'll be 10 to 20, 21 to 30, 31 to 40, and 40. It should be 41 to 50. That will be an age filter. And then I'll have a second one, which is a condition filter. So I can choose which condition I want to look at. Again, it'll be a drop down and I can choose one of the 4. Let's just change this to be a radio button just to show you a different way to select something. Then once I have made them, I'm going to use them within a function. So let me put it here. So this will be a services pie chart filtered by age. What I've got is, I've got just a bunch of if statements. If the age filter is 10 to 20, and this should be 41 to 50, then I set the value counts. I set the age data. So I'm going to do a subset of my data frame by choosing the ages between 10 and 20, 21 to 30, 31 to 40, and 41 to 50. So we'll do the filtering that way and then get the value counts and do the pie chart and then display it. And then likewise, this one's going to be a bar chart by age, filtered by condition. Okay, so I'm passing it the conditional filter. So it's the condition filter. It's one of the four. And then I'm going to do my group by age, get the average at that age for that condition, and then set the layout and everything. Okay, so let me go down here. And so after the age filter, I'm going to call services pie chart by age, and I'll pass it the age filter. And then after I choose the conditional filter, I will call age cond bar chart and pass it the conditional filter. Okay, so let's try this one. I'll save it. And if I come back here and do interactive, I get the choices. So if I notice that as I change the age groupings, my pie chart will change as well. So really interesting. Very large group in the 41 to 50. I do not use a streaming service versus here, the large group use Spotify. Okay, and then down here, we're just choosing it with a radio button. So again, changing the filter changes what the bar chart looks like. So there's a nice interactive. And then I noticed that it looks like my title did not come across. So let me go back and add that back in. Here, I'm just going to make sure I've got ST title. And I feel like that might be within the browser, that's the title. So this will actually print it. So let's go back and, okay, so now I believe that will stick on every page. Yep, I'll get the subpages. So that's nice to just have the header on every page. This is an example of starting with your Jupyter notebook and then playing with the data, cleaning the data, plotting it, and then taking that information that you've worked on in your Jupyter notebook in order to create a nice dashboard with Streamlit. Streamlit works really well for displaying data for users, both static data here as well as interactive information. When you're done with coding your app, the last thing you just want to do in the terminal is Control-C will stop the Streamlit app from running. And then, of course, you can always go back and run it again. But that just closes down that Streamlit. And the other thing you probably want to do is at some point, if you go back to that original terminal you had open for your Jupyter notebook, you still have this environment running, and you can simply deactivate it. And that will stop that from running. It's not that important because if you just close out of the terminal window, it will also close down the environment. The other thing I want to mention, so as far as doing this, it's a lot of experimenting in Jupyter Notebook, trying to get your plots to look the way that you want, to do the filtering the way that you want. I will say that I've used ChatGPT extensively for help with this. I would ask things like, how would I show the music effects column versus the favorite genre column in a chart? And it would explain how to do this. And so it does it usually with giving you some blank data. So what you've got to do is you've got to look at the code that they give you and adapt it to what you've got. So you can't just copy and paste it. And then I might say, well, wait a minute, this is my code. And for some reason, it displays depression as a sum. Why is it doing that? So you can ask it questions, and it's actually really, really good at explaining to you what's going on. I give it the code, and I'm only getting the first three values. ChatGPT is a really, really good resource as you're doing this. You can ask it questions. How do I make a plot How can I annotate values inside of a histogram? It's a really good resource. In addition to looking at what other people have done, just Googling the questions, looking at the Streamlit documentation. Don't forget about ChatGPT as a really good resource in terms of helping you with coding issues.